Hello, welcome to Priory Paddock. We're well into the second half of May now, and although it's still very spring-like early in the mornings, by mid-afternoon summer is very definitely on its way, especially on a day like today, which is bright and warm, and there has been a huge growth spurt here in the paddock in the last couple of weeks, and that is no more clearly shown than in the hawthorn trees. The hawthorn on the left of the paddock gateway here is smothered in may blossom. I can hear a bumblebee buzzing in and out of it. It's very beautifully scented, and it's in full bloom at the moment. The may is in full bloom, so you can cast your clouts with impunity because the may is very definitely out. Coming along the drive into the paddock, the wall on the right hand side, the flowers, there's a good show of flowers in front of the wall now. There's a good clump of small forget-me-nots here, the common forget-me-not with tiny little blue flowers, and right next to it there's a huge, hairy, strong-growing plant, again with blue flowers. It looks exactly like a forget-me-not on steroids, and that's called alkanet. And next to it there's the rather tatty looking, actually, four-petalled yellow flowers of the great celandine with very, very pale leaves. The great celandine is the one with the very acrid juice, very bright orange juice that stains badly in the stems, but it used to be used to treat warts. I think it must be acidic. On the left, as we come up the drive, between the drive and the boardwalk, there's an area which is pretty well full of buttercups at the moment. There's yellow flowers, bright golden yellow flowers, 5-petaled flowers of the buttercups to be seen right the way across here. And in fact, I can see still in the pond that there's some kingcups over there. But in the area immediately between the boardwalk and the drive here, there are two sorts of forget-me-not. Silly me. Two sorts of buttercup. The one has very, very broad leaves with white speckles on them. The leaves form pretty much a continuous blanket across the area here, and that's creeping buttercup. And it has the flowering stems are quite high here because there's so much competition. But there are further along some slightly taller buttercups with very, very thin, finely dissected leaves, look like starburst leaves rather than palm, an upturned palm, and that's meadow buttercup. So we've got the two sorts here: creeping buttercup, which has these big flat leaves with white dots on, and the finely dissected leaves, very thin leaves of the meadow buttercup. Coming a bit further up on the right, and in fact there's one on the left as well, there are three bushes, all of which have leaves that look a bit like a sycamore or maple, but they've got a lot of flower heads on them at the moment, and the flower heads look more like hydrangea than anything else, more like the hydrangea that has large flowers around the outside and very small ones in the middle of the flower head. And these are guelder rose bushes, and in the autumn, where the flower heads have been, there will be a lot, hopefully, for the birds' sake, there will be a lot of bright orange berries. But at the moment the blossom is just beginning to open, and so there's cream, 5-petaled cream flowers in a flat head with larger flowers round the outside, and the smaller ones which aren't open yet in most cases, although I think I can see some here. Yes, there's some here that have just opened. The flowers in the middle of the flower head have very, very, very small petals indeed. They're only about probably less than 1/4 of an inch across, whereas the flowers round the outside are at least 3 times that size. Just beyond the Guelder Rose bush on the right, the second of them, there are some flag irises. These have long sword-shaped pale green leaves that tend to droop and turn over at the tip, and wonderful bright yellow iris flowers. There's some here, and there will be a lot more in the pond, but the ones in the pond area haven't flowered yet, whereas these here by the Guelder Rose have. And walking on just beyond there, beyond the Guelder Rose, I can hear as well. There's a bumblebee here, and the bumblebee is fluttering around a mass of bush vetch, which is a pea-type flower. It has sets of leaves with a central stem and 5 or 6 pairs of little leaflets, and on the end of the stem there is a tendril which reaches out and grasps something else to hold itself up and pulls itself up on that, and then behind that they have quite large clusters of a dingy purple flower, and the ones here are pulling themselves up on some nettles and some codlin plants on the right hand side here of the paddock. Moving on towards the well, on the left hand side just below the well there is a large display at the moment of ragged robin. Now ragged robin is they're tall, a couple of feet high stems with very few leaves visible, but they have 5-petaled pink flowers, and the 5 petals are very, very, very thin. They're very finely divided, and they look a bit flimsy. The flowers are bright pink with these fine petals, but they do look a bit flimsy. Whereas on the other side of the well I can see a stand of red campion. And the red campion flowers, they're bright pink too, but they look much more robust. There's a few more leaves visible, and the stems are purplish and hairy, and the flowers, there's a lot more flowers on each stalk. On the ragged robin they probably have maybe half a dozen flowers on each stalk, whereas on the red campion you could have a dozen or more at least on each stalk. And the petals are bright pink, and they're divided too, but they look more like a circle that's had notches cut in it, rather than the ragged robin, which, as I said, look very flimsy indeed. Moving further up the paddock, up the drive, on the right hand side in front of the wall here, there's quite a good display of cow parsley, which is a tall leggy plant. It's anything from 4 to 6 feet high, with ribbed stems and finely divided fern-like leaves, and starburst umbelliferous heads with tiny 5-petaled white flowers, and of the 5 petals, the top one, the one in the middle, sticking outward from the flower head, is slightly larger than the other 2. And on the left, the codlins and cream that a fortnight ago were only a foot or so high are now at least 3 feet high and growing very fast indeed. By the time I make another of these broadcasts in a couple of weeks, I would expect them to be at least 6 feet high and beginning to flower. But at the moment, they are on their way, but they're not there yet. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the visit. I won't take up any more of your time. Cheerio.